Bom, estamos ao vivo. Boa noite para quem está aí no Brasil. Good afternoon for those here at Colombia. Estamos começando o nosso evento, Women Leadership Towards a Just Transition, Lessons Learned from Local Action in Brazilian Cities. Esse evento é um evento híbrido nos dois sentidos, ao vivo, online, presencial, e também iremos falar português e um pouco inglês. Temos uma audiência mista, mas predominantemente de brasileiros e brasileiras aqui hoje, né? I'm Fernanda Simini. I'm here as a business scholar at Columbia University in this Institute of Latin American Studies. I'm also professor of international relations at UFMG in Brazil. And also I work as a senior researcher in the SEBRE, which is a think tank of international relations also in Brazil. For me, it's an honor and I'm very happy to receive here these three wonderful leaders to talk about climate change, about challenges, and about women leadership in Brazil. And I will introduce them all in English and in Portuguese as well. So we're gonna, before I introduce them, I wanna observe that this event was promoted by Instituto Alziras in partnership with Institute Climate and Society, and also with the sponsorship or the support of the Brazilian Society here from Colombia, and also ILAS, this institute where we are right now, the venue. Okay, so let's start with Marina Barros. Marina Barros is the director of Instituto Alzira. She has a master in communication and culture from UFRJ, and she has a BA in administration from FGV. She's a researcher. She was a researcher of the Center for Technology and Society at Fundação Getúlio Vargas. And she also works as a consultant for international organizations such as UN Women and others such as OPAS. It's a pleasure to have you here, Marina. Bom, Marina, então, como eu falei, ela é mestre em Comunicação e Cultura pela UFRJ, bacharel em Administração, investigou na área, né, de tecnologia de informação, comunicação, atua como consultora de várias organizações internacionais, como a ONU Mulheres e a outras. Acho que vou passar a palavra para você, e depois eu apresento as demais na ordem da fala. A ideia é que cada uma tenha fala de 15 minutos, seguido por uma sessão de perguntas e respostas.
Obrigada, Fernanda. Thank you very much. Thank you for everyone that is here. I'm gonna speak in English to everyone here, and afterwards we translate for the Brazilian public. It's a great honor for me to be here representing Alziras Institute on this panel. Before I start my presentation, I would like to greet my colleagues here, Marina, Isa, Fernanda. It's a pleasure to be with you. And I would like to thank Marina Marçal for the generosity in helping us with the room, and Fernanda as well, to be always encouraging and so supportive of our projects and initiatives in Alziras Institute. This agenda is a priority to Alziras Institute because it combines two dimensions that we consider to be crucial and urgent in our country. First, the representation of women in their diversity in politics, and second, the development of economic models that prioritizes the nature and the people and manages to distribute benefits and losses in an equity basis among the different segments and groups. In our view, these two dimensions are connected and must advance together. First of all, for those who don't know, I would like to introduce Alziras Institute. I am one of the founders and director of the organization. We work in Brazil to contribute to the expansion and strengthening of the presence of women in their diversity in politics and within women that wants to enter politics and public management, in politics and public management. We do this through research, advocacy, capacity building, and once women are elected, and women that are in public service. We also do capacity building and articulate them in terms of agendas that we consider strategic, such as climate justice, public budget, transparency, etc. Since 2018, we have been contributing to the reduction of the huge gap of women representation in Brazilian politics. And this is an opportunity to bring to you some data regarding women participation in Brazilian politics, and why is this important to combine strategies for a just transition together with strategy to pave the way to gender parity in our country. Brazil occupies a shameful position in terms of women political participation. We are ranked in 146th position from 186 nations ranked by the Interparliamentary Union. It's far below the position occupied by our Latin American neighbors. In local governance, men are ahead of 88% of Brazilian city houses. It's relevant to say that women mayors are more likely to be elected in smaller and poorer municipalities in Brazil. And regarding Black women representation in local politics, the situation is even more dramatic. Once more than a quarter of Brazil's population are Black women, and only 4% of the cities have a Black women mayor elected. So this data reveals to us how sexist and racist values are still present in our society, and this is something that we must overcome urgently, especially when we talk about fostering sustainable development, promoting climate justice, and strengthening democracy. So today, I will bring a report that we produced in Alzheimer's Institute called Brazilian Mayors in Climate Action, Women in Leadership Towards a Fair Transition. This report aims to assess both the achievements and the challenges faced by women mayors in the leadership of climate policies in their municipalities in Brazil. The trigger question that we brought to this report is how are women mayors in Brazil fighting climate change challenges, and which solutions are them prioritizing in order to promote climate justice, sustainable development, and the energy transition. So the report is divided in 3 sections. The first section reviews the women mayors' perception about climate change and their environmental priorities as public managers. We surveyed about 43% of the 647 women mayors that we have in Brazil. So I will bring some data from this survey that we did. In the second session of the report, I will bring comparative assessment of greenhouse gas emissions in Brazilian municipalities regarding the gender and ethnic racial belonging of their mayors. The data was collected from SEG Municipalities platform. And the end of the report, I'm not bringing the cases, but it's also possible to find 4 case studies of public energy transition policies led by Brazilian women mayors in the North and Northeast regions. So now I'm gonna go through the first data that from we call Censo das Prefeitas, which is like census, yes. Well, first regarding the fight against climate change, we can say that women mayors are aware of the relevance and urgency of this agenda, but there are opportunities for deepening their understanding and help them finding better solutions. In our survey, we asked them 2 questions. First, do you consider climate change and global warming to be important in the public agenda? And second, do you have specific policies to deal with climate change in your municipality? And we got as a response that 85% of women mayors from all regions of the country and from all political parties consider climate change, yes, and global warming to be, yes, important and relevant and urgent issues. On the other hand, the second question about the specific policies to deal with it, only 15% of women mayors claim to have specific policies to deal with climate change in their municipality. So we can observe also regional differences in these answers. And the mayors of the North region, this is the only highlights that I want to do. There are others in the study, but I will highlight the North region, are the ones who most affirm that climate change and global warming are relevant and urgent, 90%, but end up being the ones who less have specific policies to address them, 4%. So it's a huge, huge gap. When asked about their environmental solution priorities, the use of clean energy was mentioned by almost half of women mayors, 49%, followed by the fight against deforestation, 45%. It's interesting to note that less than a third of them identified as priorities the solution most directly linked to the municipal attribution within the scope of Brazilian Federative Pact, such as risk management and natural disasters, 25%, expansion of public transport and active mobility, 17%, and air quality, 9%, which may be related to the demographic characteristics of cities ruled by women mayors that are still concentrated in cities up to 20,000 inhabitants, and sometimes, most of the times, with rural characteristics. So it's worth remember as well that 64% of the 673 cities ruled by women are located in the North, Northeast, and Midwest regions in states that of the legal Amazon, where deforestation has advanced significantly, and the population's access to energy has not been fully universalized, especially in areas further away from distribution networks. So this makes sense, a lot of sense, that these two themes, these two agendas, deforestation and clean energy, were priority for these women. Then another important piece of data that I want to bring today, and that was further explored in the report mentioned before, concerns the performance of municipalities governed by women in relation to greenhouse gas emissions. Let me see my, oh, are you, no? Sorry,
yeah,
I don't know what happened.
You have like 5 minutes.
Okay. So the data available at SEG platform indicates that North region in Brazil, cities, not region cities, lead the ranking of emissions in the country with 35%, followed by Midwest with 22%, Southeast 19%, and South and Northeast cities appear tied in the 4th position with 12% each. However, if only cities with elected women mayors are considered, the North region concentrates half of the emissions. This means that the mayors of the North region have great responsibility, recognize these challenges, and can definitely contribute to the design of new models of development and transition to a low carbon economy. It's also important to say that they are creating solutions within their municipal institutional capacities. For example, in energy transition, water management, solid waste management. But regarding a more consistent policy to fight deforestation, the municipalities face institutional limitations to act. Well, I will not have time to go through the cases, the case studies that we have in the report. I strongly recommend you to download and read the cases. And I would like to have a last message from Instituto Vidas. We believe that a just transition will only be possible with broad social dialogue and with the full participation of women in their diversity, in the negotiation process, and in the spaces of power and political decision-making within the scope of this agenda. It's important to remember that historically, women are primarily responsible for domestic and care work that organizes and guarantees life in society. It's also too important to remember that they are the main protagonists of the so-called economy of care. I don't know if it's economy of care, economia do cuidado,
Yes.
it is. And that they play a relevant role in a wide range of sectors, accredits Brazilian women are bearers of fundamental knowledge and skills to contribute to the formulation of new development paradigms that place the economy at the service of life and a net zero economy. So thank you very much for everyone's attention, and I hope we have a great debate.
Thank you, Marina. I didn't mention at the beginning that we are fortunate to have these women this week in New York, because a series of events that are going on here in the city related to the climate change and other environmental issues. So we have the Brazilian Climate Summit last weekend, and this week we have the Climate Week in New York, and also the United Nations General Assembly, and also preparation for COP27. That is the one is coming now. So that's the reason why we are getting too much leadership in New York this week specifically. And one of them is our next speaker, Isa. Isa, she's a doctor in environmental sciences, and also doctor and master in environment, and she is biologist. She works for the government of Rio Grande do Sul as assistant in the Secretary of Environment, and also she coordinates the climate agenda in the state. So Isa, it's a pleasure to have you here. Por favor, fique à vontade para falar em português, se quiser, a palavra é sua.
Ok. Boa tarde a todos. I think I will speak in English because Marina speaks for always better, okay? Okay. Okay, I'm Isa, I'm from Rio Grande do Sul, and in Rio Grande do Sul we have a woman, House Secretary of Environment, Marjorie Kaufman. She is not here because, how Fernanda said, we had a lot of another agenda, and she is in another agenda now. And I will talk about a little bit about our energetic transitions and how we can do this in Rio Grande do Sul. The proposal of the state of Rio Grande do Sul advancing the perspective of implementing the necessary conditions so that the scenario of a fair energy transition does not remain on the paper. These are socioeconomic conditions for the creation of a virtual cycle through a new production chains with policies regulation, creation of normative device with incentive programs that will range from the training of professional vocations to financing lines that will cover activities that encourage good practice. Our object is, in the wake of the college of already consolidation regulatory policies that have demonstrated the weak points of the face, the Rio Grande do Sul proposal starts from the basis of the problem, the diagnosis of the socioeconomic impact of the transitions in the short, medium, and long term will demonstrate the situation of social vulnerability in which the population, families directly involved in the local economy, could be inserted if there is no structuring of transition device that favor gradual and adaptive change to a new job market. One of the peculiarities of greatest interest in the scenario is the strengthening of female empowerment, commonly to the strengthening of political space for public participation that already exists, such as we have Foredes, it's some municipalities together that make his laws. And yes, like also, but from regions cities in her
Corégio.
regions. Corégios, yes, Corégios. And yes, and hydrographic basin committees. Then have a lot of women in these committees, and we have a lot of policies, and they can make rules with our CONSEMA. It's our Conselho. Council. That we can make rules from the state, and we have a lot of women in this place. And which should incorporate the unfolding of the energy transitions in the public agenda of institutional articulation. In a second moment, the study contract by Rio Grande do Sul will present the prognosis with the possible scenarios for the implementation of the fair energy transition policy, with a risk analysis for the decision making. In this context, it will be taken into account existing policies in various governmental spheres and into micro and micro scales, regulation at what are the financing perspectives that involve the entire production change effect. Finally, in 2023 and 24, the state of Rio Grande do Sul intends to present a state plan for the socioeconomic development of a fair energy transition policy that is a model being in its border presenting the state and as entity that has the responsibility to promote the basis condition and structural for change in production chains, stimulation sustainability, economic growth, within assuming new attributes, updating the practice of the existing structure by encouraging and the delegation rules between public and private entities. And just for example, we have our metrics from energy is like in all Brazil is water energy, 80%. And we have solar energy, wind energy in Rio Grande do Sul now is increasing, and some a few coal thermoelectric. Then we have a different diversity metrics, and the objective is the clean energy will be the feature, and we will go into this transition in our state. Okay.
Thank you, Isa.
Thank you.
Well, now, last but not least, the responsible for the zeroing, for connecting all of us, Marina Marçal. Marina was here at Columbia last term during the spring. She was visiting scholar at the law school, working with environment and energy program. She is a PhD candidate on law and sociology. And she also has a master in sociology and law in the field of social environment from UFF-ERJ, Federal Fluminense, where she also graduated. Well, Marina coordinates the climate policy portfolio at the Climate Society Institute. And if you follow her in her social networks, you're going to see that she is in everything that's going on in New York this week. So if you want to see what's going on in New York, just follow her in her social networks. That it's going to be a lot of teaching about climate agenda, international climate agenda. Marina, it's a pleasure to have you here. Please, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Fernanda. Thank you all that are watching us and also being here attending this event. Such a pleasure to be back to Colombia. I was just remembered that we were here in this room receiving Gil do Vigor with Silvio de Almeida, and Joaquim Levy supposed to be here, but he couldn't. I mean, it was really good to see how the Brazilian academic community here is very connected and open for interdisciplinary approach. So I'm very thankful for that, and also thankful to have the opportunity to be connecting really interesting women from different perspectives. We have Fernanda, which is also from SEBRE in Brazil. They are doing great work in having webinars about different perspectives, climate change and the political scenario and international, how it is connected with Brazil right now. I'm very proud of the work that Alzira are doing, and it's a pleasure to have a woman representative from a state in Brazil here, and also some friends like Lizzie that is here, and some colleagues that were organizing the Brazil Climate Summit last week. So it's really a pleasure to be here. I will take a step aside to be talking a little bit about the role of my organization. I'm representing the Climate and Society Institute, which is a organization that does grant making facility, and we support organizations in Brazil to do the decarbonization process and to get involved in the climate agenda. So during these days here in the Climate Week New York, I think we have the chance to be connecting the Brazilian community in Brazil online, but also the Brazilian community. They are attending the event right now here because I think the best we can give for the Brazilian society as a person that already studied here is how we can learn if the global bring back to our country. When I was a student here, I was really worried that I would save this knowledge to myself and then I'll give it back to my country. And I think us as third sector and as a person from the public sector and as an academic, we can be having this moment together with people that can amplify our voices than what they are attending. And I hope part of this come to your researches while we were studying here. So back to the topic of this event about women. First of all, we need to have in our minds that women are the most affected by climate change, but specifically in Brazil, I mean, all over the world, they are also responsible for the production of food. And to keep their communities in a situation of safety in their territories when it's about food security. Brazil is suffering a lot of hunger right now. And it's very paradoxical that this woman, they are responsible to be providing the food in their country. They are not the owner of the lands. And I think it's very important to be highlighting this because the sector that are the most responsible for emissions in Brazil is agriculture, but the sector that we may have the most opportunities to be reducing emissions is energy. And that's why I think this event is really important. So women in general, they have the role, the fundamental role to be looking for collective solutions. And I really would like that we could have a round for listen the cases that Marina Barros can read from Alzira's the perspective, because they work with female mayors in Brazil. So women have this fundamental role to be looking for collective solutions, and they are the majority of the population in Brazil. But also in a country, as Marina mentioned before, the country that has the Black population as the biggest too. So when we are talking about food insecurity, when we are talking the most affected by climate change, and when we are talking about ancestral and collective solutions, we are talking about Black women in Brazil. And it's important to be highlighting this because as we heard before, as Isa and Marina mentioned before, this is not the seen the representative as we see when we are talking about the leadership, the decision makers in Brazil, but also all over the world. And so if we do not see this representative in the decision maker level, and once women are the majority of the population, we have a chance, a huge opportunity in a year of election for presidents and for governors and also for parliamentarians to be voting right, to be voting in women, or to be voting in people that empower women or create public policies that respect women and the environmental agenda. I think is very important in Brazil. Is already increasing their concerns about climate change and the environmental agenda. And we are seeing that the parliamentarians in Brazil right now are not showing this same connection with environmental concerns. Hopefully we have a representative from the state that is concerned with the climate agenda. And I think that's why this event is important to have Alziras and a representative from Rio Grande do Sul here. For the energy sector, I would like to highlight that the sector is composed majority by men in general, all over the world. And according with IRENA, which is the International Renewable Energy Agency, women in 2019 were just 32% of the workforce in renewable energy. And when we are talking about the sector of oil and gas, they are even less. They are 22%. So back to this overview, in a country that women are majority, in a country that women are the main workforce, why we do not see women in the energy sector as we have the most opportunities for reduce the greenhouse gas emissions in our country. I think we should be thinking about this challenge and think about which solutions we can create to deal with it in a decade that is very decisive to deal with climate change. And also Brazil has some experience with solar and wind energy. And we had luckily to host an event with Alziras last year in the COP26 in Glasgow, only with women. And we had a mayor from Jandaíra, which she could explain her experience with the wind energy in her city. And also we had the governor from Rio Grande do Norte. In Brazil, we have 27 states and only one female governor, which is very serious. We're talking about representative. And we could hear from their perspective that we had, well, first we had more women working in the wind energy than in the oil and renewable energy in general. But we still have more men working in the wind energy in our country. So why we are importing, bringing men from other states to be working in Rio Grande do Norte in the sector of wind energy? And in case specifically from Rio Grande do Sul, which are here, we have a challenge with the coal. We do not have many experience with coal in Brazil. Coal is a sector that's not exactly responsible for the most emission, but we definitely need to stop the coal activity. And last year, the governor got compromised to stop with coal activity. But Climate and Society Institute is very concerned about how we can do the phase out of coal, how we do this energy transition in a way that we cannot, we should not be affecting the economy, but also not the social aspects. We do not people to be unemployed in a country that last year we have 15 million people unemployed. And this year we have 19 million people unemployed, but we had a majority in an informal situation. So it's almost the same as insecurity. So how we can do a phase out of coal in Rio Grande do Sul, understanding that if we take the workers from coal unemployed, we're gonna impact their families and their women to be protecting their families. So I think we really need to amplify this discussion of women and just transition first, because they work, the sector should be bringing this woman to do capacity building with them so they are able to work with renewable energy. But second, because we we need to do the phase out for renewable energy in Brazil and all over the world in a respectful way with the workers from the fossil fuel activities. That's it.
Thank you, Marina. Well, I will take advantage of my seat here and actually make two comments in one question. The first comment that I'd like to bring in to share is that I have a hypothesis, and I'm actually working on this on a paper on this topic, connecting far right-wing governments with all this agenda of, you say, negacionismo, I don't know in English, denial, right? Of that we have seen now with COVID and the health issues. And for me, it's not a coincidence that those governments that denied COVID was also the governments who were like dismissing the role of women in politics. And I mention this because I think we could also maybe hypothetically extend this argument for the environmental agenda, in the sense that those areas, those fields of knowledge or those fields of action, climate change, public health, they are traditional sectors where women can have protagonism, and also sectors which are directly connected with human rights, with human protection, with protection of biogenetics, and also important issues that are concerned with gender agenda. So my first comment and question would be like, do you think that, because for a long time, I come from international relations field, as I mentioned in the beginning, and for a long time we treated environmental as soft politics. You know, hard politics are war, economics, and things that matter. Environment is those things that, okay, we can think about that in the future, like gender, like inclusion, racial inclusion, diversity. But now that environment has become an issue, has become, I think, a matter of survival for many countries. Now we can talk about the securitization of environment politics. But that's different. This is a different context, because now we are here. We women are already here in this agenda. So I'm just making like this very vague comment, just trying to connect agendas here. But I want you to hear, to listen from you, like your opinion on this issue. Like, how do you see this the connection between, you know, like gender politics and environmental politics from your point of view, in your not from academic, then how can you connect this maybe theoretically as well? My second comment would be on what Marina just mentioned. I think you brought very interesting figures on the participation of women in sectors, in energy sectors. And just for curiosity, we are doing a research now, I hope it's going to be published soon, focusing on the new economy, the new green economy. Our hypothesis, let's forget about the past. I mean, if these sectors, some sectors are just men dominant, but let's talk about future. So let's talk about agroecology. Let's talk about biodiversity. Let's talk about what's coming, and how is the share of women? How like these young women are being prepared for this new economy, and how is the share of ethnicity as well? Like, if you want to open new spots, new economy, new things, that more green economy, are this generation also being prepared, or asking a different, are this generation being prepared to enter those sectors? And another question, are those sectors prepared to be more diversified than the traditional ones? So I also want to hear from you, that also you are on the ground more than me, to see, do you think it's a wishful thinking, or you're going the right direction? Do you think that these new sectors are more open to diversity and also for women leadership than these traditional ones? Should we bet on this trend? And my question, just a small, quick question, is for Marina about the research. I think the data is wonderful. I'm very curious to read the report. But do you have like a comparison between human male majors, female majors, and male majors, just to see like how expressive is this difference, like for, support for climate agenda, or just a curiosity? Yeah, thank you. And then I just want to say that I'm following the chat in YouTube, so if you have online questions, and also the audience here, you have, please, if you want to add some question, maybe you can gather them together, and then you have one.
And we will put in the chat the link for the research.
Perfect.
So,
Yeah. Então, se vocês tiverem uma pergunta, quiserem emendar.
I don't know if you prefer to answer those first and
Yeah,
then we have.
Prefer? Okay.
Yeah,
So-
exactly.
I'll try to start with the first one. That honestly, I could give a course about the first one. Because when we are talking about geopolitics, but the climate agenda, the environmental agenda, it starts with an idea that we cannot ignore the colonialism and the industrial area. And that's why the countries in development decide that it would not fair to have an obligation of targets in common for all the countries.
Yeah, sure.
And that's why the first NDC in Paris, they decided that all the countries should pick a target for themselves, like be volunteer. It's a principle that is called principle of common capacities, but diversity,
Responsibilities, yeah.
And that's why the climate agenda, climate policies, it was born with volunteers compromising. But of course, IPCC has the main role to show how we are raising for more than 2 degrees and how even 1.5 degrees is unbelievable, is incapable to believing that territories for some people. And that's why we have the role of litigation now in this decade. Litigation raised more than 60% in the last few years. And that's why we have more people pushing the states to get targets with ambitious, more connected with the needs of this decade. So I think geopolitics is boring, but as a lawyer, I think we need to bring it back how it was born. But I agree with you in a certain way now. I think maybe some policies we could advance for an obligation, but it's hard when we have so many countries negotiation, and that's why we have 27 COPs. 27 COPs. Maybe if we have more obligation than volunteer, we could need less COPs to be moving forward with some topics. About yes, 27 COPs. I try to not be pessimistic, and every time I say, well, the Black movements from Brazil, they start to go last year, so maybe they do not need 27 years.
Yeah.
Maybe with the Black
Yes,
people in the
yes.
agenda, we do not need more 27
more,
years.
yeah.
Because maybe some of them will not be here in 27 years ahead in a country that kill a Black person every 23 minutes. This is very important to be highlighted. And I have huge expectations in a COP that will happen in Egypt, and considering the African diaspora, what we can learn about benchmarks and good practice that we can bring to our country. But I do agree that this exchange between New York and Brazil is important, because the New York community is very strong in doing strikes and protests in the streets, and Brazil is not. This year, the Amazon Day, I think, was the first time that we had so many people on the streets asking for an environmental agenda. And considering the role of women, if you look for the protesters in Brazil, we always had women on the streets talking about agroecology, talking about food security, talking about access to water. So it just depends on the lenses we're going to use to talk about it. Honestly, I forgot about the most of the question.
Sorry.
But I was doing my best to try to answer because I really think Marina Baz can highlight some cases that you have about the second question, the difference of men mayors and women mayors. I think you can talk really good about it. And also you were talking about working with environmental secretaries when they are women or men.
Well, I think I'm gonna answer in Portuguese.
Ok.
Eu acho que em relação à participação das mulheres na política, nos diferentes espectros ideológicos que a gente tem no Brasil hoje, eu posso dizer duas perspectivas, assim, acho que uma pelos partidos políticos e do que a gente vê em termos de dados, né? Quando a gente pega o enforcement da lei de participação de reserva de vaga para candidaturas, que hoje no Brasil é de 30%, e de financiamento de campanhas, que também é 30%, e avalia os partidos se eles estão cumprindo essa regra, pouquíssimos cumprem, mas tem alguns que cumprem mais, um pouco mais do que outros, né? E, em geral, são os partidos mais voltados para o centro, para o espectro ideológico do centro e centro-esquerda. E a segunda dimensão que poderíamos avaliar é da construção ideológica do papel da mulher na sociedade por parte de partidos mais conservadores e que se associam a determinadas vertentes das igrejas evangélicas, que colocam a mulher no espaço doméstico, prioritariamente. Portanto, o espaço público fica mais restrito para elas circularem, e a gente sabe que os obstáculos para as mulheres participarem da política dizem respeito à sua participação, inserção nos espaços públicos, rede de contatos, e também de não ter sobrecarga de trabalho doméstico e cuidado com os filhos. No Brasil, a gente tem uma cultura machista que a mulher fica muito sobrecarregada com esses cuidados da casa, dos filhos, e até na nossa pesquisa das prefeitas, até para as prefeitas a gente perguntou isso, quem cuida da sua casa, quem cuida das suas coisas, e a maioria delas, pouquíssimas situações, o marido divide efetivamente, ou o marido cuida prioritariamente, ou, enfim. Então, tem uma tradição muito... tradição até, diria, escravocrata mesmo no Brasil, de a gente ter pessoas ajudando, em geral, mulheres negras que são pagas para fazer esse serviço, e aí, portanto, para elas é ainda mais difícil, né? A gente vê que as mulheres negras, por exemplo, em relação ao patrimônio para candidatura, as mulheres negras saem num patamar completamente diferente dos homens brancos, que já vêm com um patrimônio muito mais vultuoso para competir numa candidatura, por exemplo, né? Às vezes até prescinde de recursos públicos para fazer suas campanhas. Eu acho que por aí já, né, a gente já vai avaliando um pouco essa questão. Acho que a gente tem dois bons exemplos na América Latina, na Colômbia e no Chile, de propostas que conseguiram combinar muito mais, né, a questão do papel das mulheres na política e das soluções baseadas na natureza, porque eu acho que conseguiram trazer na Colômbia uma vice-presidente negra, né, e no Chile uma constituinte paritária, e o que a gente viu de propostas foram, que infelizmente não passou, mas assim, propostas muito inovadoras e muito consistentes em relação às soluções possíveis para a transição, né? Então, acho que, de fato, mostrando que uma maior participação das mulheres faz com que novas propostas, novas soluções sejam construídas, né? E lembrei quando quando a Isa, obrigada, falou sobre as lideranças mulheres das bacias hidrográficas. Esse é um dado super interessante no Brasil. A maioria das lideranças dos comitês de bacias hidrográficas são de mulheres, porque são as mulheres as mais impactadas pelas questões e se envolvem diretamente na política, né, que é o Comitê de Bacia Hidrográfica, uma instância que essencialmente vai tratar de decisões políticas e de diálogo, e tem muitas e muitas lideranças mulheres, né? E, por fim, em relação à comparação entre prefeitos homens e prefeitas mulheres, como a gente não faz o espelho, né, dessa pesquisa com os homens, mas a gente tem 3 dados que eu posso dar muito interessantes. Tem um estudo do INSPER e da USP que demonstrou que as prefeituras governadas por mulheres no Brasil tiveram 33% menos mortes e 40% menos internações por Covid do que as prefeituras governadas por homens. E esse é um estudo que já foi para peer review, já foi publicado.
Hold on a second. I think this one we should translate.
Yeah. Yes. Could you maybe I tried it. Let me see. There is a study, a research in Brazil that proves that cities governed by women had 30% less lethality of COVID-19 and 40% less international hospitalization from COVID-19 during the pandemic than cities governed by men. And then they isolated the groups of cities, so are cities from the same size, and
It's a very
consistent
experiment, study.
Yeah.
So and control for it.
And one of the hypotheses, which I totally agree, is that, and we saw that women mayors were more consistent, were more contundentes, were more rígidas,
strict to social distance measures,
non-pharmacological measures to fight the COVID-19 in a context where the federal government said, that's okay, you don't have to stay home, you can go work and you don't have to wear masks. And women mayors were suffering violence from groups in the city because they close the
shops,
business,
non-essential businesses.
But the result is that there is
They suffer with election.
Yeah,
the only Brazilian woman governor that decided to do a lockdown. She suffered a lot about people saying we need to work, we want us to lose our jobs. And you were saying, and I wonder about the lethality considering public safety in general, not only pandemic in cities that are governed by women, because I never saw in Brazil a woman get an agenda of public safety. It's like, it's gotta have cops on the streets, it's gotta put people on the jail. I never saw women having this platform. So this is really interesting.
Yeah, it's really, and another hypothesis is that in our research, we find that 70% of the women mayors elected in Brazil were public servants, and most of them in the social service and health service. So they were
these are natural interconnected agendas, right? And that's my question. Like, if the environment would be like a natural interconnected agenda, a place where a woman would naturally go.
Yeah, maybe if we look through the question of the comitês de bacia hidrográfica and other related issues. And also there is another research from Unicamp, which is a state university in Brazil, that indicates that cities governed by women have more investments on primeira infância,
Child.
early childhood, and which results in less lethality of de crianças, enfim, de newborns. Yeah. And the third one is the one that we did with the SEG municipals data of greenhouse gas emissions, which compares cities governed by women and men, and the result is that the 20 biggest cities
Responsible for emissions.
are only one of them is governed by women, and the 20 that has less emissions or negative emissions from this 20, 12 are governed by
Wow, that's a lot.
See?
That's a lot. So we definitely have good data.
Yeah.
Ok.
Eu vou falar em português e
Claro.
qualquer coisa. Então, falando um pouquinho sobre a legislação, né? Eu vejo que a mulher, nós, enquanto Rio Grande do Sul, a Secretaria do Meio Ambiente agora está sobre a pasta de uma mulher, e que é a secretária Marjorie, e antes estávamos na FEPAM, que é a Fundação Estadual de Proteção Ambiental, que é a fundação que regulamenta todo o licenciamento ambiental no município. Então, o que a gente percebeu nesses últimos 4, 5 anos? Que muitas pessoas chegam a nós e dizem que houve uma percepção diferente dessa visão feminina perante ao atendimento aos empreendedores, não tornando mais fácil, mas não nesse sentido, né? Tendo a rigidez, mas tendo esse olhar feminino da complexidade, muitas vezes, do empreendimento e tentando auxiliar para que se tenha uma harmonização aí nos processos de licenciamento. Então, isso é algo que a gente tornou muito válido. Os prazos de licenciamento no estado inteiro também reduziram muito. Tínhamos prazos de uma licença para um empreendimento de porte grande, 250 dias, agora está em torno de 130. Então, tudo liderado por mulheres. A presidente era mulher, as diretoras técnicas mulheres, a maioria das chefias mulheres. Então, a gente tem um case, assim, muito interessante, que a gente traz esse dado do estado. E no secretariado todos são 24 secretários, acho que temos 4, 5 mulheres. Então, às vezes, estamos na pauta ambiental só com a secretária de Meio Ambiente, muitos homens junto. Então, eu percebo que está tendo uma inserção, sim, o olhar, a escuta, né, da fala da mulher nesse sentido está sendo muito ampla cada vez mais. As nossas leis no estado são as mais... Muita gente fala que o estado do Rio Grande do Sul tem as leis mais rígidas do Brasil. Né? Então, a Fundação Ambiental ela tem mais de 30 anos. Então, a gente escuta muito dos empreendedores, se não cumprir a legislação, vamos para Santa Catarina, é o estado ao lado, é o estado vizinho. Então, a gente escuta muito isso. Então, a questão de manter a rigidez e manter o dizer não, essa é a legislação, essa que vai ser seguida, temos que reduzir as emissões. Então, isso, assim, está sendo muito bem visto. E a secretária cansa de dizer que, então, vá para outro estado, se não quer cumprir a legislação e não seguir as regras ambientais que nós temos, é assim que vai ser. Então, eu vejo como essa relação de gênero na política, nesse sentido, está sendo muito bem vista, né, no estado, e a gente faz parte da ABEMA, né, que as gurias também devem conhecer aqui, que é a Associação Brasileira de Entidades de Meio Ambiente, onde também é uma mulher que preside a associação de todos os estados, e tem sido muito bem visto isso também, e muitas mulheres secretárias de meio ambiente dos estados, então é um caminho que está sendo muito bem apresentado e visto. Quando eu escuto a Marina falar das questões de o homem auxiliar das questões domésticas, né, para mim é um pouco difícil isso, porque eu venho de uma família onde meu pai sempre ajudou tudo com 4 filhos, meu marido faz tudo com as minhas filhas, eu trabalho em Porto Alegre, fica a 100 quilômetros de Lajado, então ele fica sozinho, e desempenha esse papel muitas vezes, né? Então, assim, eu acho que cada vez mais os homens estão começando a ter essa percepção da mulher sendo inserida no mercado e precisa desse auxílio, dessa ajuda. E sobre a última questão da nova geração, né? Acho que as meninas não falaram, mas eu sou professora de formação, dei aula muitos anos, durante 14 anos em escola pública, em diferentes segmentos, né? De classes inferiores ou classes superiores, enfim, E eu percebo muito que as crianças estão, né, durante agora estou 3 anos fora de sala de aula, mas eu percebi muito o avanço dessas temáticas ambientais, tanto na transversalidade entre as disciplinas, né, cada vez mais todas as disciplinas já estão lidando com esse assunto, mas precisa melhorar muito, né, precisamos ter mais incentivo governamental. Então, muitas vezes fica para o professor de ciências, o professor de biologia, tratar sobre meio ambiente. Sempre é o professor de biologia, né? Por quê? O professor lá da área social também tem que estar responsável pelo setor, pelo assunto. Então, acho que isso também, essas políticas públicas voltadas para a educação também tem que ser aprimoradas muito. Né? A gente vê que as crianças estão incorporando essa nova geração, né? Não só crianças, mas os jovens que vieram dessa geração depois da gente, eles têm já essa cultura ambiental e preservação muito maior do que a nossa tinha, mas ainda precisa ter um incentivo muito maior do setor público, né? Fora as famílias, né, que a gente sabe que é dentro de casa muitas vezes que vem essa intenção toda. Eu acho que era isso as perguntas, né? Obrigada.
Excelente. Obrigada, meninas. Bom, nós vamos então agora encerrar o evento online, porque já chegou o nosso timing aqui da gravação e também nós não temos perguntas online, mas quero agradecer a audiência em nome do Instituto Alzira, Instituto Clima e Sociedade, e a gente segue com a nossa conversa aqui informal, já que temos também um lanche aqui na sala nos esperando. Então, boa noite, né?
Obrigada.
Obrigada.
Fernanda.
Obrigada.
Para realmente só para não deixar mais. São duas. A primeira é o nome do painel. Sorry, I can't.